There's absolutely no ways.
Right.
Are there 12 million
is-
Ahmadiyya Muslims in the world today? They say, where did you get this figure from?
Where do they get their figure from?
Can you tell me, how do you respond to claims that your community is a cult?
I want to know how you define it, because it's exactly what we've seen happening in Islam. It's exactly what we've seen happening in Christianity. It's exactly what we've seen happening in the time of Moses. That love for the founder is there. So if that if that classifies us as a cult, we are a cult. If that doesn't classify a religion as a cult, we're not a cult.
Since the second caliph, every Khalifa since then has been, related in the family bloodline. Call it the family firm.
Do they? They'll have to do that with the Holy Prophet, unfortunately. His caliphs, were they not his relatives? They were either his fathers-in-law or his sons-in-law. Does that make Islam a cult?
What is your reaction to claims that Mirza Ghulam Ahmad was mentally ill during the second half of his life? Some of your ex-members have told me that they think that he may have been suffering from schizophrenia.
Right. I feel very proud when someone says that, because it's exactly the same thing which is said about my holy master, Hazrat Muhammad, peace and blessings of Allah be on him. Every prophet, that is what he's been told. Hello, Declan. Good morning and welcome to our studios here in Battle Futu. And Assalamu alaikum in the Islamic way. Peace be on you. You're an author. You're a researcher, and you've been researching into Islam, especially modern Islam, Islam in Britain, and you've also looked into the Ahmadiyya community. I believe you've got, really good friendly ties with many Ahmadis as well. So I welcome you here today, and you wanted to, speak about Ahmadiyya faith, the Ahmadiyya sect of Islam. So here we are, you as the author, the researcher, me as a very ordinary Ahmadi.
Oh, thank you.
Over to you.
Thank you very much, Asif. So it's lovely to be here, and thank you very much for inviting me here today. And I can see that you're nice and relaxed after coming back from your Jalsa Salana this year.
Absolutely, yeah. It is refreshing.
You've had that a few weeks ago.
It was, yes. Yeah.
I couldn't attend this year. I have attended in the past. I think I've attended on 2 occasions. I think it was just before COVID. I think I was there in 2018, 2019, something like that.
Wonderful.
So tell me a little bit about it this year. What was the theme this year?
The theme this year, it's always, you see, basically the Jalsa Salana in itself is a theme. It's a congregation. It's about Ahmadis coming together for a very spiritual reason. And that remains to be the general theme of Jalsa Salana. And because the aim and objective remains spiritual, it doesn't always have to be a strict theme around something. It's about seeing what, the world, what way the world is going, and where Muslims, especially Ahmadi Muslims, need guidance. And then that is where the head of the Ahmadiyya community, Khalifatul Masih.
And people come all over the world.
From all over the world, wherever they can come from.
I think I read over 100 countries.
Over 100 countries this year, yeah. I think it's been like that for many years now. So yeah, they come from all over the world.
So how many people attended this year?
This year it was around 43,000.
43,000. Wow, okay.
Yeah.
So that's up on previous years.
It is up on previous years indeed. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I noticed that your caliph always gives his speeches in Urdu, never in English. Is that correct or not?
It isn't actually, no.
Right.
I mean, it depends on the audience. When he speaks to, say, the peace conference available.
Personally, I would just like to hear him speak more English.
All right, so he does.
I
mean, because you're specifically asking about Jalsa Salana. If you look at the other congregations that he speaks to, say the peace conference,
yes, I've been to the peace conference once, and I can't remember. He might very well have spoken in English.
He did speak in English. He did speak. He has always, ever since 2004.
Has he? Okay.
He's always spoken in English, wherever he's been, to the European Parliament, to Capitol Hill, to any other parliament, any other congress of the world. He's always spoken in English, making it easier for the audience there to listen to him directly and not a translation.
Yeah, well, I just think, with English being the universal language, that, I just think that I personally think that it would be a lot better if he did speak more in English and got his message out there more in English.
The Caliph, Hazrat Khalifatul Masih, he is from an Urdu-speaking background. He speaks Urdu to the vast majority of the community, and he wants Urdu to remain alive.
No, and I appreciate that. And he may say many wonderful things in Urdu, but just I don't hear them, and people of my ilk won't hear them. We don't hear what he says. His message isn't coming through to people like me.
But he's left no stone unturned. He said everything that he says in Urdu, he said everything in English as well. So whether it's speaking to the youth of the community...
Well, perhaps that's not disseminated as much as it perhaps needs to be.
Yeah, I think one needs to make an effort, Declan. Even Ahmadis have to. Even Ahmadis have to. There are responsibilities we all get.
I'll dig a little bit more.
Yeah.
Tell me, Asif, tell me a little bit about your numbers, because when I did the previous podcast, which is one of the reasons I guess that I'm here today, is when I did that podcast 6 weeks ago or so with Sheikh Azra Rashid, so many people contacted me afterwards, and they were really angry with me that in the book that I had written about the Lahori Ahmadiyya movement, that I had got the numbers of Ahmadiyya completely wrong, because I think in the book I said there are 12 million Ahmadiyya Muslims in the world, and they categorically said no, no, no. How many Ahmadiyya Muslims are there in the world?
Before I go to that, one, I don't work for a department that carries out such censuses, and such a census is not possible.
I won't hold
approximation. I stick with the approximation of 12 to 15 million, something
12
like that.
to 15 million?
12 to 15 million. That is the official figure that I have. Like I said, I haven't personally looked into the numbers and counted them.
I'm afraid the numbers went in the opposite direction, because they said there's absolutely no ways.
Right.
Are there 12 million Ahmadiyya Muslims in the world today? They said, where did you get this figure from?
Where do they get their figure from?
Where would you say the most Ahmadiyya Muslims?
The most Ahmadiyya Muslims would be in Pakistan.
Still in Pakistan.
Still in Pakistan.
Okay.
But then if we're looking at the continent of Africa, they would most certainly outnumber the Ahmadis in Pakistan as well. Yes, together, combined. Okay. So there are countries that are able to maintain a register, electronic register, saying, this is the number of people registered with us. But then the majority of the countries, especially in Africa, it's not possible to maintain carry out and maintain a number based on a certain census, because it's like tribes that come in, join in thousands, and yes, there are people that leave as well. Talking of Africa.
Now, we mentioned Africa. Now, one of the criticisms and the critics, and this is coming from the critics, this is not me personally, and it's a bit of a contentious question, but you've invited me here today to ask you tough questions. So this is really the first tough question. It's about people in Africa who convert. Now, your critics say that the expansion in Africa is attracted to Africans because of promises, your community promises them education, healthcare, pretty wives, asylum, and so on. That they're groomed, in other words. What's your response to that?
Right. My first response would be that critics can say whatever they like. And like I said, it's always good to talk where you can, based on evidence. Are they attracted towards education? Well, yes, they must be. Why not? Because that is something that is very Islamic that we have to offer. Healthcare, which falls under humanitarian services, if that attracts someone to Islam, so be it. Why not? Because it's one of a very, very, very Islamic things in essence that can be done.
No, of course, these are basic human rights. I think the critics are coming from the viewpoint, from the stance, Asif, that they're not really that bothered with the religion. They're not really that bothered about Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, that they're taken in by these attractive offers of, education, healthcare, pretty wives, asylum, a better life, basically.
So going back to the early days of Islam, when the Prophet of Islam, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, when he invited people towards Islam, with the very basic teachings, because you see, it took 23 years for the Quran to be revealed.
Yes.
And it took 23 years, bit by bit, for the teachings to be communicated to the people who were joining. They started off with a very basic notion. They accepted it with a very basic notion. Even when the Quran was revealed, Even when Islam was spreading, the Quran was revealed, the Prophet had passed away, the Quran was full and final, and now the Quran or the Islamic teachings were being taken to other parts, to non-Muslim parts, and being preached. People were accepting Islam sometimes only based on the model of the ruler, on the practical example presented by Muslims, and not necessarily by saying, I need to read the whole of the Quran to know what Islam is all about. So there's always something that attracts you to something, and then you find out more. It starts from interpersonal, communication.
Yeah, no, I accept that. I accept that. There's a seed is sown, and
of course.
Yeah. So you completely dismiss those type of criticisms from your critics.
I mean, yes, I would. I wouldn't hesitate in doing that. Yes.
Or a pretty wife.
That I can dismiss outright. That I can dismiss.
You can?
I
Okay,
can
good,
dismiss
good.
outright.
Okay.
Nobody offers a pretty wife. No Ahmadiyya missionary. And I'm not only talking about trained missionaries, I'm talking about anyone who...
I'm glad that you said that, because there was emphasis placed on those last 2 points.
Right. And
wives and asylum.
I would place equal, if not more, emphasis in saying that I'm not only talking about trained missionaries, anyone who invites anyone to the Ahmadiyya faith, be it a missionary or an ordinary Ahmadi like me, they do not offer anything like that in return. So that is outright rejection from me on record.
Good. No, that's good. That's good. That's why I asked you the question. Moving on, Asif. Now you've read this little book of mine, haven't you? This little green book. What did you think of it? Tell me your thoughts on it.
On record again. It's good. It's really good you went into that.
No, I'm not fishing for a compliment or anything. Yes, no, I really enjoyed my time. I really enjoyed my time in Pakistan with the Lahori movement. I thought they were a really, really lovely community.
Wonderful. That makes me happy. They associate themselves to the founder of the community. It makes me really happy when they say that.
They do, but they obviously differ enormously about your founder.
Yeah.
Obviously, they don't believe that Mirza Ghulam Ahmad was a prophet.
Right.
They certainly don't have the same level of deity that your community has towards Mirza Ghulam Ahmad. And obviously, they reject your current caliphate and your current caliph. But I suppose the question that I have to ask, your community is not on very good terms with the Lahoris.
Right. I mean, the two major differences that you've rightly mentioned around the status of the founder of the Ahmadiyya community, Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, peace be on him, and caliphate, of course. Without going into detail of what us, as they call the Qadiani group, believe, and what as they're called the Lahori group, believe, I would just keep the matter, or take the matter, to the Holy Prophet of Islam. They accept the status of Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad as being the promised Messiah. Right?
Yes.
They do accept that.
Yes, no,
right?
they do, but they don't put the level of deity that your community has on that.
I would disagree with the term deity, but yes, I know where you're coming from. So they do accept him as the promised Messiah. The issue is around prophethood.
They accept him as the promised Messiah, but they accept him first and foremost as the rejuvenator of Islam.
The rejuvenator of Islam that was prophesied by the holy founder of Islam, the promised Messiah that was prophesied by the Holy Prophet of Islam. I'm not going into the books of Mirza Sahib for that. I'm not going to any Lahori. I'm not going to any Qadiani for that matter. I'm going straight to the Holy Prophet. That rejuvenator, that promised Messiah, in the words of the holy founder of Islam, Hazrat Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is a prophet. So it's the prophetic status actually comes from the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam attached to this person who was to be the rejuvenator, to be the promised Messiah. So once you accept that, you are left with no choice than accepting that he had a prophetic status, albeit a subservient prophet of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but that's a detailed theological debate. So I just rest my case with what I've just presented from the Holy Prophet of Islam.
But is it not very sad that you guys have not spoken with each other for a long, long time?
I think yes, we should speak more about certain
they are
issues
your
and try and
closest
resolve.
relatives.
Of course they are.
And you're both estranged from each other.
Of course they are. I mean, let me tell you, it might not come to surface as such, but I can give, this is a personal testimony that I can give you. I mean, I've lived in Zambia with my father. My father was a missionary there, right? And we had quite a few Lahori Ahmadis coming.
Did you get on well with them?
And they said, yeah, of course. There was absolutely no problem, apart from these differences. And this is, I think, this is what we practice, this is what we preach. Differences can always be there. It shouldn't...
But you can agree to disagree.
You can agree to disagree at times.
Yeah, at some point or other, the olive branch has to be
Of course.
handed out.
And absolutely. I know that when the Caliph was visiting Fiji, where there is quite a large number of Lahori Ahmadis, I think the message was very clear. So who else needs to say it? Within our setup, the Qadiani branch, if you like, the Caliph is the topmost figure. And if he invites, we're all behind him. Mm-hmm. And he's very openly, and I can say this on many occasions, at least 3 that I can remember off the top of my head. Whenever I have had, mentioned the Lahori Jamaat, I must say I found a very soft corner in the heart of the Caliph. This is personal testimony again. Well,
that's good to hear because, it's very touching to go to some place like Lahore, because the community there, they took me to the building where Mirza Ghulam Ahmad died. I was in the bedroom in the room where he died. People like you, that would be so good for people like yourself, to go and see if the relationships between both communities was...
There's nothing holding us back. I mean, there's been open expression of compassion, of love from the Caliph.
But those are just words.
And words have to be materialized. Action. You see, we can't coerce them. We can invite.
Moving on, can you tell me, how do you respond to claims that your community is a cult and that it brainwashes people into believing that Mirza Ghulam Ahmad is the promised Messiah?
I would go back into the history of religions to answer this question. Like I said, I can sit here and make as many claims as I like, but I don't want to do that. I want to base it on, if not the Islamic tradition, then at least, all of the religions, how they've seen, all founders of all religions have always started off on their own, and then with people coming around them, turning it into their nascent community, and then it progresses. That figure, the founding figure, is always revered and respected by the people who accept the message of God. I'm talking in religious terms and comparative, all religions, right?
I'm with you, yes.
As a messenger of God Almighty. And he is the sole agent or divine agent telling them, this is what God wants you to do now. Even out of the history of religions, you see that founders of certain ideologies, founders of religions, will always be revered and admired and deeply loved.
But are you deeply offended by this word, the word cult?
That's what I'm saying. I want to know how you define it, because it's exactly what we've seen happening in Islam. It's exactly what we've seen happening in Christianity. It's exactly what we've seen happening in the time of Moses and all the end of the prophets that we know of.
You're absolutely right. There are many cults in Christianity, yeah.
Right. No, I'm not talking about the cults within Christianity. I'm talking about Jesus Christ and his followers. Although some of them did betray him, but yes, they,
I would disagree with you on that, but anyway, yeah.
Right. So that love for the founder is there. So if that classifies us as a cult, we are a cult. If that doesn't classify a religion as a cult, we're not a cult. So it's the definition, it's the understanding of the term that would offend or not offend me.
Let me tell you 2 things. Obviously, mainstream Muslims, they will say they're a cult.
Right.
Your closest relatives in Lahore, they also said they're a cult.
Right.
And they based that basically on your current caliphate, and how obviously since the second caliph, every khalifa since then has been, related in the family bloodline.
Right. I mean, is that
they
the
call
reason?
it the family firm.
Do they? They'll have to do that with the Holy Prophet, unfortunately. His caliphs, were they not his relatives? They were either his fathers-in-law or his sons-in-law. Does that make Islam a cult? If it does, I'm happy to accept Ahmadiyya as a cult.
This is what they say. that it's a family firm, and that it's highly likely.
Then they'll have to say that Islam, as founded by the Holy Prophet, as succeeded by the first 4 caliphs, was a cult. So if they point that finger at me, or Ahmadiyya,
Well, they are pointing it at you.
well, and they're pointing the rest of the 3 fingers at themselves, because they're going to be held accountable for that, and they will have to answer that. Because if those familial ties of the successors, if that is what defines a cult, then
Why do you think they haven't thought that point out themselves?
I don't know. They need to tell me. They haven't thought so many things, I think.
Because they say that it's highly likely that after the current caliph, and he's still a relatively young man, I think he's 73, I hope he lives for another 20 years or whatever, maybe longer.
So. Yeah.
They say that after his time, it's highly likely that a member of his family, be it one of his sons or grandsons, will carry on.
Okay, they can say what they like. You see, I can't tell them what to think and what not to. But even if that is to happen, Abrahamic faiths, all the prophets that followed Abraham were from his progeny. He had prayed for his progeny, and the whole line continues to be from his progeny. Does that nullify the prophethood of Abraham? Mm-hmm. Does that just negate the status of a religion of any Abrahamic faith? Mm-hmm. It doesn't. So even if that is to happen, going back in the history of religions, I don't think that can be held against the Ahmadiyya community just as such.
But your caliphs, they're elected, aren't they?
They are.
Yeah.
Yes. So
So
like
it's
I said,
just by coincidence that
it is by coincidence, because nowhere in the rules does it say that it has to be a member of the...
Yeah, I thought that. But they clearly say, well,
Yeah, like I said...
That's like having an election in Russia.
Well, but then, like I said, it's... How is that so? How do they think so? Because the rules are there. Nobody has ever said we were coerced, we were told who to vote for.
I think if anything, this brief discussion with us has really proven that you really do need to communicate with your closest
We've been
relatives.
doing so, Declan. I mean, I don't know why, because these are the issues that are addressed, and it's not the first time that you're asking and I'm answering on behalf of the community. They're very regularly asked, and we do. And just as you haven't heard the Caliph speak in English, which surprises me, it also surprises me that you haven't seen the discourse and the debate that goes on between the Ahmadis and the non-Ahmadis.
Still staying on the subject of Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, another one, Asif, that I was wrapped over my fingers on in this little green book has gotten me into a lot of trouble. Can you tell me when was Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, the year of his birth? What was it?
We've worked it out to be 1835.
1835?
Yeah.
Whew, I got it right. I was going to say, why did I get that wrong? Because obviously this was proofread and agreed by the Lahoris. You know, it wasn't published without them going through it, and that's, I said 1935. These critics again have come to me and wrapped me over the fingers, and they said he was born in 1839.
Right.
/ others said /
1840.
1840.
His date of birth was never recorded.
His date of birth was never recorded.
Was never
So
recorded.
that's why there's a little bit
It
of...
wasn't fashionable. It wasn't customary to have every birth recorded in British India, just as it wasn't the case even in Britain for a very long time. And it's quite recent if you look into history. How births or dates or days or years of birth were remembered were by attaching them or pairing them with an important event of historical nature that had happened. So he was born when such and such happened, or she was born when plague broke out, etc. And that is so even with the birth of the Holy Prophets of Islam, it's about when Abraha attacked, it was around that year, or it was such and such season. Aisha was born in such and season. Fatima was born in such and such season when this had happened, that had happened, when the Kaaba was being reconstructed, etc. Hadn't changed much. And we're talking of the British colonial days of British India. The issue comes where, he states in one of the books, say that I was born in the latter years of Ranjit Singh.
I'm with you, yeah.
1839, 1840. That is where he himself has clearly written, and that is where everyone wants us to stick to that. So when you look at it, there are other indicators there where he tells that I started receiving revelation when I was 40 years of age.
Yes.
And I didn't start receiving revelation until the time when my father passed away. You work that out, you can see that he was born at least 4 or 5 years prior to the 1839-1840 marker. When I was born, I was seen as a blessing, as a good omen for my family, because that is when Ranjit Singh had returned a lot of confiscated property or estate to my father. So it does not mean that he was born the year Ranjit Singh died. It's the latter years. His birth brought about good fortune for the family. And that again takes us back 4 or 5 years prior to the marker of 1839, 1840. So, yeah, so it was an estimation he was putting down, just as everybody else did. And that is...
No, I accept that, and I think you've given a good explanation about that, and I'm glad that you've said it's 1835, because I don't like mistakes. And I thought, how come the Lahoris...
Yeah.
I was going to be angry with them, Asif, if they
provided wrong.
I thought, come on, that was proofread by 2 senior members of their community, so they would have known that. We're still, for the next few questions, we're going to stay on the subject of Mirza Ghulam Ahmad. Now, obviously, to you believe that Mirza Ghulam Ahmad is the promised Messiah to everyone, all religions. Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. So what work is your community doing to make this a reality?
The founder of the Ahmadiyya community, the promised Messiah, did not bring a new message. His mission was to reform Islam, rejuvenate it, and convey it to all other faiths. Because even with Islam, he actually ended that dichotomy of a Messiah and of a Mahdi. He said there can't be 2 leaders at the same time, otherwise it's going to be even more chaotic than it is at the moment. So those 2 have to be one. So that, and then with all other faiths waiting for a God-sent Messiah or whoever, the founder of the religion, to come back, the world is just going to be a very, very chaotic place. So it has to be one faith that unites all of them, and that one faith has to be Islam.
Where do Christians come into the equation here? Because, you're basically telling me that Mirza Ghulam Ahmad is my promised Messiah as well.
Yep, absolutely.
But most Christians will never have heard of him.
Well, we've been trying. We've been trying to send the message out of Islam.
You've been trying for 100 years now.
We've been trying for 100 years, yes.
So that and
Christianity. How many years did Christianity take to be heard, to be noticed?
That's a subject for another day. What work is your community doing to make this a reality?
Yeah.
You've been asking that for 100 years.
Reaching out to all faiths and trying to explain to them that Islam is the only solution.
When was the last time you did that to the Catholic Church?
Well, it continuously goes on. And I mean, the head of the community, the Caliph, he's written to Pope directly. We've got missionaries going out to Roman Catholics, to the missionaries of Church of England, people of the Church who adhere to the Church of England and other denominations of Christianity, and trying to explain.
But I can assure you that so very few people have ever heard of Mirza Ghulam Ahmad. And I probably only heard of him because obviously I have an interest in Islam and I do my research and I'm a writer and so on and so forth. But to the outside world...
And I'm not denying the fact that a lot more needs to be done. And I'm not at all saying that every stone has been turned. There is a lot more to be done. The Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, the debates that he had with Christians, where the first condition he would have was that we're going to stick to our books. They're very detailed, and they're out there, and we do refer to them when our missionaries speak to Christians. But then you have to look at what the challenge is, actual challenge. Christianity itself, yes, you can have around how many? 1 billion Roman Catholics or something like that?
1.3 billion.
1.3 billion. So they can be huge in number. But how Catholic are they in their religious outlook? The wider world, the whole wide world is actually turning away from God. And that is the immediate risk. And that is the call, emergency call that needs to be responded to.
Well, you've been at this job now for 100 years, so you just don't just start talking about recent years that people might have become lapsed in their faith.
I go back to the time of Brahim Ahmadi, and I hear our opponents, opponents of the Ahmadiyya community, talking about Brahim Ahmadi. Oh, what was even special about it? The founder wrote in it, so he knew it right from the onset of his mission, what he was actually going to be tackling. Because people asked him, why are you writing another book? There's there's a whole stacks and stacks of books written already. And he said that the type of opposition that faith as a whole has been challenged in this age, it has never happened before. So he knew what kind of a tide was coming towards religion.
And the reason that I'm asking you this question, Asif, is because a lot of Ahmadiyya Muslims have said to me, well, it took Jesus a long time for his message to get out there. It was a couple of 100 years. But that's I think that if you go along those lines and you say, well, it'll be a couple of 100 years before Mirza Ghulam Ahmad is going to be accepted. Mm-hmm. Well, but what are you doing now for that to become a reality? And that's why I say to everyone, because it's easy to say that. It's easy to sit down and not do anything to make that a reality. If you're of the mindset, well, I'm not going to be able to achieve anything in this lifetime, my children aren't going to be able to achieve anything, that's way down the line. Right. It's just going to miraculously happen by itself. And that's not very real either, is it?
No, it's not.
You have to sow seeds now. Remember sowing the seeds that we talked about?
It's not, we have been sowing seeds for a very long time. And the strategy has always been very fluid according to where more energy and time and money, of course, which is a major factor, needs to be invested.
You're not a poor community.
Of course, we're not. Ooh. But who are you comparing us with now? With the Roman Catholics? Don't do that, Declan. Come on.
We're richer.
Yeah, absolutely. You are, definitely. And compared to that, we are a very poor community. They say, oh no, they're not in millions. They're only maybe a few 100,000. And then they ask, how are the Ahmadis running a television channel? It's a multi-million kind of a venture. How are they building mosques? How are they affording this many mission houses?
Look, we're sitting here today in the largest mosque in the UK.
Of course we are.
The largest mosque in Europe. And this is your refurbishment cost a lot of money. So you're not a poor community in that sense. But I appreciate that you're a much smaller community.
But then all of these ventures and all of these projects to be run, those who say, they're very small in number, they'll have to reconsider. I mean, we're talking in millions of dollars and pounds at the moment. So the subscription is coming from. Coming back to the sowing seeds thing. Yeah. I mean, we're training missionaries specializing in various faiths, from Baha'ism to Christianity to, specializing in branches of Islam, say, the Shias and the Aga Khanis and the Ismailis, they like to call themselves, etc. And they're reaching out to the right type of people, communicating with them. And we are actually waiting for the results. We do see them, but we are actually hoping for greater, bigger results.
Could you give me an example of the result that you've seen?
The result?
Yes, please.
Is by placing the Ahmadiyya Muslim community on the map as the world drifts away from religion. What is Islam seen as? So the major faiths that the world knows about, the faithless world that is turning very rapidly into a faithless global village, they know about Christianity, about Islam, about, say, another Judaism. But then Islam, that has been tainted and painted as a synonym of terrorism and violence. We have been trying, and we are trying to remove that blemish and tell the world that that is false. Islam has nothing to do with violence. The Caliph, I've seen him in action at work from 2003 up to now. I've grown from a young man to a middle-aged man, seeing that he spent every fiber of his being telling the world, wherever he goes, Islam is not a terrorist religion.
Hold on to that thought, because I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes. But just staying on the sowing seeds, has your community accepted that mainstream Muslims will never accept Mirza Ghulam Ahmad as the promised Messiah?
We believe that eventually...
2024, right here, right now.
Right. They will one day, because...
They will one day.
They will one day at least know that the Messiah that they're waiting for is not coming back. And then they might consider.
But what do you think, Asif? What has to change before that?
Their thought
before the penny drops,
and their understanding of the belief. They have to be rational about it.
But you've seen a lot of the debates, and we're going to talk about the debates in just a moment. In particular, I'm talking about Adnan Rashid.
Right.
They're both Rashids. I mix them up sometimes. Adnan Rashid. You've seen those debates.
Right.
I mean, sowing seeds, making progress.
Yeah.
Convince me here.
Okay. I mean, you see, I wouldn't say Adnan Rashid per se is going to one day come around. I hope he does. I really wish he does. I wish that for everyone.
Well,
but
Adnan and his ilk, other people of his caliber.
They will have to realize, because their elders have been waiting for the Messiah to descend right from the time when Hazrat Mirza Ghulam made his claims.
Right.
They were saying, his elders were saying, this is the time for the descent of the Messiah. Never happened. And then their next generation said the same. Yes. And then their next generation says the same. Yeah. And Adnan Rashid and his associates, they sit and say the same. It's been over a century. And this Messiah is just not ready to descend. And I'd really love to see him descend on a minaret, and Adnan Rashid and whoever you're naming here running to say, oh, there is our Messiah. Are they going to accept him? Declan, I must tell you, they need to sort their issues out first. And that is where...
Undoubtedly, I'm sure
that is where the importance of the mission of Mirza Ghulam Ahmad lies. As long as the Sunni-Shia split is there, no Messiah will be acceptable to them. Because the Sunni Messiah will never be acceptable to the Shia, because they have their own interpretation of caliphate and imamate. And
no, I agree with you, because you mentioned Azra, how he described the cover of the book.
I just found that distasteful, to be honest, and more than anything else.
It might be distasteful, but to be quite honest with you, Asif, I have been in the presence of other mainstream Muslims, imams, Sunni imams. They have said more brutal stuff in private to me than what Azra said on camera.
I know that.
Believe me, that was minor, what he said.
It's not.
So that's the mindset.
That is the mindset.
So we're talking about sowing seeds. So here in 2024, that's the mindset of mainstream Muslims, mainly Sunni Muslims, that they are not remotely close.
Absolutely, I totally agree with you.
You do.
I do, because this is where the Ahmadiyya challenge is dual in nature. Because whatever is being said, and the hate that is being spewed against the founder of the Ahmadiyya community, and what they've said to you in private, and you wouldn't say it here for a civilized audience to listen, is more or less the same that is being said by the founder of Islam, the Holy Prophet Muhammad. So do Muslims give up preaching Islam just because the world has a very bad image of the Holy Prophet, and it's getting worse? It hurts my heart when I say that. It's getting worse by the day.
I'm not asking you to give up.
No. What I'm saying,
the question was, what work is your community doing to make it a reality? That was the question.
We are working. It's twofold now. We're working at the front of defending Islam. One, from it being painted as a terrorist, violent religion. Two,
which we will come on to.
Okay, and two, by telling the world that the allegations, the hate, the obscenity that is said about the founder of Islam is not true, is a misrepresentation of his character, and threefold, I would say. And then there is the message of the founder of the Ahmadiyya community, which is none different from the message of the founder of Islam.
Staying on the reputation of Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, Asif, what's your reaction? And I appreciate that this question may be a little bit contentious to you. What is your reaction to claims that Mirza Ghulam Ahmad was mentally ill during the second half of his life? Some of your ex-members have told me that they think that he may have been suffering from schizophrenia.
Right. I feel very proud when someone says that, because it's exactly the same thing which is said about my Holy Master, Hazrat Muhammad, peace and blessings of Allah be on him. Every prophet, that is what he's been told. We need to see, we're talking here about ESP, which is extrasensory perception, which is a form of knowledge which the religious lingo would call revelation.
Yeah.
It comes in quite a similar way. I mean, the descriptions that we have for what he gets labeled as such is exactly the same condition or situation that the Holy Prophet would go into when he would receive revelation. What we need to look at with that state of mind, if he brought that message from, God forbid, a schizophrenic bout or a fit, that God has told me that I shall cause thy message to reach the corners of the earth, living in a village of the Indian Punjab, which nobody even knew about. He had no resources. He had no newspaper, no press, no media, no means at all. And then from there, people mocked him and told him that something has gone wrong with your mind. You need to get yourself checked up. How are you going to get your message across to the world? And we see that the message did get out to the whole wide world.
I suppose they bring in schizophrenia and schizoaffective disorder because of,
My answer would be the
people
same.
who have those, enduring mental illnesses, they do hear voices and
They do.
so on and so forth.
And
they're making a comparison there.
And my
But you
response
totally and completely reject those as being, quite distasteful, I should imagine.
100%. The situation or the state that he would go into at the time of revelation, like I said, that was the state of my Holy Master and his Holy Master, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Oh, I think you've given a good answer to that. Okay, we're going to move away from Mirza Ghulam Ahmad now, and I'd just like to ask you a few more questions before we wrap up. Do you think women are entitled to leadership positions in your community?
They are eligible to have any position that is allowed to them by Islam.
Because your nearest relatives are very progressive with the positions that they give women.
I do understand.
Well ahead
I'm
of
going
you
to be
guys.
talking. I'm not saying that our community should imitate them or any other community. I again would go back to the Islamic tradition. Any role that is allowed to women in Islam is allowed to women in the Ahmadiyya community. There's absolutely no difference.
Are there are there many female Islamic scholars in your community?
There are.
There are.
And not only from now. Going back to 1903, 1904, we had a woman by the name of Sakinatun Nisa who was writing in the Urdu press and writing intellectual articles. And, one of the Ahmadi women by the name of Begum Shafi, she was at the forefront of the Pakistani independence movement, or the Indian independence movement, I would say, and the formation of Pakistan. She was out there, completely dressed in her parda. And nobody can take that credit away from her. She was actively involved in political activity and the goings-on. And she was right there. She was also appointed the head of the women's wing by Ahmed Jinnah, the founder of Pakistan. So yeah, we have a very bright history. And yeah, getting better by the day. Like I said,
Getting better.
Of course, definitely. In the time of the founder of the community, education for girls, which was a very novel concept in the part of Punjab that they lived. Yes, it was something maybe brewing in Aligarh, but it wasn't happening in the Indian Punjab, the northern Punjab especially. So it had been there. Missionary women were trained who would go out into areas where Christian women, female missionaries were preaching so that these Ahmadi women could go out, right? Khola Hubsh in Germany is an Ahmadi woman who is invited by the mainstream media to go and speak for them, on behalf of the community. She speaks wonderfully well.
Asif, let me just talk to you a little bit about jihad. Now, you'll be pleased to note that I was very complimentary about your community in a chapter that I wrote for this book on British Islam. This was Dr. Taj Hargay. He's the founder of the Oxford Institute of British Islam. So I wrote a chapter there, chapter 4, Is Islam a Peaceful and Tolerant Religion? I note that the Islamist terror preacher Anjum Chowdhury, he was recently sentenced to 28 years in jail. Now, your community is often praised for its stance on jihad and the use of non-violence. What message do you have for other Muslim groups who do not share these views?
I just want them to look at their revisionist approach, and I'm sure they'll get the answer. The dialogue is the only way forward. And even if Muslims were to retaliate, are they strong enough? Have they not tried? Is there anyone, because jihad happens at the call of the Amir, the leader. Who is going to call the shots? Will they respond? The whole Muslim world respond? Say if Mohammed bin Salman was to call the shots, a Wahhabi, a Salafi? Would they be good if Asrar Rashid or some other Barelvi was to call the shots? Would the rest of them respond? So there has to be a call.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the mindset of Islamist terrorist preachers here. I'm talking about the likes of Anjem Chowdhury,
right.
28 years in prison. He's been to prison before. He'll probably die in prison.
I would say
his mindset.
I just ask them to.
How do you penetrate that type of mindset?
By asking them to read, not the teachings of the founder of the Ahmadiyya community, because they don't believe in him, teachings of the Holy Prophet of Islam, where you cannot coerce somebody, you cannot retaliate or take up arms unless there is a call by a leader, right? And unless the support of God is in there. We've seen what have become of Houthis and what is becoming of them and what will become of them. We've seen what has become of Daesh, right? And how they've ended. So that is
have the ended.
Well, I mean, that the mindset hasn't. The mindset hasn't. But then, yeah, but we've seen what has happened. Their aspirations, they haven't been able to meet their aspirations.
Yes, but they'll always get supporters that'll come back and try again, won't they?
Well, that goes on then. I mean, that doesn't finish with anything, with like the IRA and all of that, and that goes on. I mean, the mindset never goes. The shreds do remain there, but it's about tackling the main issue, the root cause.
The root cause, indeed. Now, tell me, Asif, we're coming towards the end, just one or two more questions. Tell me, do you consider Hamas a terrorist organization? Yes or no?
The way it is transpired, I would say yes.
You would say yes. I'm glad you've said yes. You'd be in trouble if you had said no here.
Why don't you ask me anything about their opponents? Why only Hamas? And why has only Hamas to be?
Just hold on. Hold your horses there. I'm just about to.
Yeah.
I believe a very good man in your community, Karim Khan. He's the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court. What he believes that Hamas and Israel are both guilty of war crimes, both. Terrorism on both sides.
I don't think it's because he's an Ahmadi. I don't think his Ahmadi faith has got anything to do with that. We've seen the widespread acceptance for that. We've seen widespread opposition, but any person would get to that conclusion.
I'm not too sure that they do. I mean, my personal one, I think that what Israel has done is absolutely, it is genocide. That's absolutely quite clear. But I think that maybe if somebody like me arguing with other Muslims might disagree and say that Hamas are not.
Yeah,
it's not a terrorist.
I mean, like I said,
they're not terrorists. I think that's where the argument would be.
Yeah, and I would underline where I said how it has transpired, because what has happened over the years, how you shape the psychology of a certain nation, the suppression, it does lead to so many ugly things, and I think the way Hamas has transpired is one of them.
Yes. Okay, last question to wrap this up. Obviously, we've talked about sowing seeds, we've talked about debates, we've talked quite a lot here today. We've covered a lot of ground. I suppose I wanted to ask you one last question about young Ahmadiyyas. How strong do you think their faith is at the current time? Because there is, again, your critics are saying, the young people, the young generation are not taking the religion, they're not taking Mirza Ghulam Ahmad as seriously as perhaps people of your generation and your father and grandfather's generation, that it's that there's cracks.
You see, I see them born in the West, brought up in the West, in a society which is predominantly turning agnostic, which is a step ahead of atheism, because with atheists you can always argue on the basis of debate, and agnostic just doesn't want to care. You see, he doesn't want to know. Even if there is a God, he said, I don't care. There isn't, I still don't. So, amid all of this, they're going to colleges, they're going to universities, they're being taught by lecturers and professors who majority of the times don't believe in God or in any religion, right? Despite that, if they make their way to Baitul Futuh, if these cameramen, all of these standing behind these cameras, sitting here, brought up in this society, if they're ready to come and pray here in the mosque, volunteer for religious activity.
No, you're right, up until a certain age. But I guess when they leave the family home, when they go away to university,
even after that,
when they come in contact with people more so outside your community, when they come in contact with other Muslims, again, this is what your critics are saying. Your critics are saying that, they're watching these debates and they're beginning to realise that Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, that the claims that he made are not true.
Yeah, I'm telling you from what I witness, from what I see on a day-to-day basis.
But you're a prominent member of this community, so I'm going to respect your answer. So
right, yeah, I think that they do still. I do not at all, because it would be silly of me to say that there are no issues at all. I mean, the tempest of faithlessness is at an all-time high.
You say, what would the issues be? What issues are
the issues
referring
would
to?
be people considering, reconsidering, giving their faith a second thought, trying to revise, actually trying to understand what have I believed in all along. Is it right? Is it wrong?
I get that, and I would accept that. Would you say that 20, 30 years ago, you were a much stronger community and much stronger in your faith than you currently are? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying that the young people have always faced the challenge, right? Yeah. Me growing up, there was a magazine that was dropped, slipped under the door into our house, which was Khatam Nabuwat, right? It was full of all of this. It's just the mode that's changed. It's just that material isn't slipped from the doorstep. It's all there on Twitter and social media and Instagram and whatnot. So the challenge has always been there. And we've grown stronger.
Well, critics of the community are saying that there are real strong challenges here at the moment.
Right.
Real strong challenges.
I do not deny the challenges.
More so than ever before, and that in at least 20 years' time, that your community will see a massive decline because of the younger generation.
If they want to predict, they can. They can predict whatever they like. What are they basing that on? What are the indicators they've seen? I personally think, majority of the times...
Well, it's anecdotal evidence. It's not hardcore evidence.
An Ahmadi youth who goes out to question his faith is a boomerang that is destined to come. Because once
destined to return.
Destined to return in most of the cases. Why? Because once you believe that Jesus is dead and is not coming back, because of this and this and this and this reason, you can never begin, or not never, but you cannot, it's not easy to go back to believing that a man was taken alive. I'm sorry, I'm not hurting your Catholic sentiments, am I?
Well, you're a little bit, but
okay.
Come on.
I'll carry on, yeah? Thank you very much. Right, like I've let you carry on in so many things. So that he was taken alive. He's sitting up there on the right side of God, and someday he's going to descend. An Ahmadi, once an Ahmadi, will remain an Ahmadi. Why Ahmadi opponents, some of the opponents who left the Ahmadiyya, why they've survived to this day, is because they had come in touch with the Ahmadiyya theology and the Ahmadiyya polemics. Otherwise, they would have vanished in thin air.
So what advice would you give to young people?
Understand your faith. Don't just inherit it. And understand it from the right
But I suppose I see what your critics are saying is that the young people are looking further afield, that they're talking to people outside your community.
There must be. There might be, right? My advice would be for them, according to the instruction of the Holy Prophet of Islam, they need to follow an imam, because whoever is without an imam, a leader, is doomed to go astray. So that would, they want to go out, they want to see what's happening, they want to see some really nice speakers, want to be with them, sound very Muslim by saying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That doesn't change faith. You can have beautiful reciters of the Holy Quran, reciting La ikraha fid deen in the most melodious tunes and voices. But if you coerce people, if you persecute people at the point of the sword, at gunpoint, that melody is good for absolutely nothing. You can be a good speaker, but if you don't have a leader, one leader spearheading,
No,
you're without an imam.
I get you. You need. You're talking about the captain of the ship.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I get that.
That's why I don't call it a problem. I call it a challenge. Challenge is the beauty of life. Challenge is the beauty of faith. Challenge is what makes you immortal.
Well, on those great words, I think we'll end for today. Asif, thank you very much for inviting me here.
Thank you very much.
Lots of questions, and there were a few more I could have asked. But
some other time, definitely, you're more than welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Declan. Thanks a lot.